Megan Woods, I'll start with you. Labor has called for the government to pause funding for Gumboot Friday after comments by Mike King about alcohol and mental health. Essentially, you were saying it is a solution for those who are struggling. Megan, what do you make of those comments? And was he wrong to even suggest it in the first place?
Look, I think what we know is that alcohol and young person's mental health are not good companions, that we know that there's some really negative outcomes for young people when they are using alcohol as a crutch like that. But what really we've asked is there to be a review of that funding, because what is of concern to us is, of course, this was, I think, a really tricky ground that we can get into where political parties start campaigning on funding a particular provider and not going through a proper process to actually find out who is the best person to deliver that service. That was what happened. New Zealand First and the National Party campaigned on funding Gumboot Friday. Now, by all means, political parties can say, let's fund young person's mental health, and we should do that. We should be talking to the electorate about things we want to do, but actually coming out and saying who we're going to buy it from, I think gets into really tricky ground. It was always a political risk for the government, and I think that we now need to make sure that young people are safe, because for me, that is the most important thing at the core of this. We are dealing with a really fragile and precious thing, and that is the mental health of our young people, and we've got to make sure that we're not putting that at risk. And I haven't heard a commentator over the last couple of days who have said that what has been said about young people using alcohol as a way to get through being a good idea. I don't think there's anyone who works in that area that thinks that is a good idea.
Your comments are absolutely 100%. Nobody would doubt that. But why punish young people for the actions of Mike King? Why put a pause on the funding that arguably does go to counselling sessions for young people?
It's not about punishment, Chris. It's about making sure that there's a provider who is serving our young people well, that we are making sure that the advice they're getting is safe, that it is going through a proper process, because that has what to be at the core of it. This isn't about punishing either young people or Mike King or his organisation. This is about saying there's some really serious comments out there that seem to fly in the face of accepted wisdom of the practice of people who work with young people in this area. We need to make sure that we've got it right, rather than it's because a political party campaigned on it and they want to deliver on that election pledge. That's what we can't afford to do. We've got to make sure we're putting our young people first, Chris.
Matt, as Mental Health Minister, what did you make of Mike King's comments?
Yeah, well, I came out pretty early yesterday and said I disagree with his comments at this time. Clearly, alcohol is not a solution. But look, I think Megan said it all on behalf of the Labor Party about how they're approaching this. This is just all about politicking. Really, a contract is about results. It's about the hundreds of counsellors, the Gumboot Friday counsellors that work for Gumboot Friday, who deliver thousands of sessions to thousands of young Kiwis in a time of mental distress, quite often within 48 hours of that young person reaching out. It was quite evident in the Auditor General report. He was impressed by the performance measures in the contract, the evaluation outcome. We only need to think about Megan's time in government, where the Auditor General was very critical of the $1.9 billion, said there was no evaluation outcomes built in. And he didn't know if taxpayers were getting value for money out of Labor's investment into mental health. So we've got a contract, clear performance indicators, and that's why at this time I disagree with Mike. But actually, I support the work he does as an advocate. He's really challenged the stigma and discrimination about mental health in this country. I'm supportive of his work, but at this time, his comments are incorrect.
Matt, have you spoken to Mike King following his controversial comments?
No, I haven't spoken to him, nor do I intend to. The contract with Gumboot Friday, which is different than Mike King as the individual, is with the Ministry of Health. And what this government is clear on doing is that with increasing mental distress, we want to back local organisations who are delivering on the ground. We've got Gumboot Friday with an available workforce outside the publicly constrained mental health system, and that's why we made a decision to fund them. This is not about Mike King. This is about backing the hundreds of Gumboot Friday counsellors who are delivering support to young Kiwis in real time, and that's what we're backing.
Megan, is it a fair point that despite Mike King's pretty daft comments, we still got problems out there in New Zealand, and if it means still funding the councillors, it's still not a bad thing to do?
Look, I don't doubt for a moment there are people in there doing great work with our young people. But what really concerns me about what we just heard from Matt, he's talking about value for money. He's talking about contracts. What I'm concerned about is the safety of our young people. We've got somewhere out there, and Matt, it is nonsense to be polite about it, for you to try and separate Mike King from the organisation. He is the figurehead. He is the spokesperson. I'll just finish. Matt,
as well.
I'll just finish. No, I'm not. I'm concerned about the
label will stop it, but we're backing Gumboot Friday.
Matt, I think this will work much better if we talk one at a time.
Yeah, go ahead, Megan.
What I'm concerned about is the safety of our young people. Outcomes, value for money, contracts, that's not something that is top of my mind at the moment, or for the Labour Party. Just to come out, Matt, and say we're politicking is utter nonsense. We went through a political process to select a provider there was always risks attached to that. And actually, I'm really astonished that as Minister, you haven't taken a more proactive stance and picked up the phone and talked to Mike about this. I think what we've got is someone that is really the spokesperson and the figurehead for an organisation that said something that is rightly causing alarm with so many people, and it is the safety of our young people that has to be front and centre. Bugger the contracts.
Well, Matt, I'll let you respond to that.
All now with that comment, bugger the contracts. And that's why we saw under Labour there was no performance management of contracts. There was no evaluation outcomes built in, and the Auditor General reported on that. Very clear in this government, we'll have outcomes and results, and that's why we've got performance management built into the contract, because what we want is to deliver support to very vulnerable young Kiwis in distress, and that's what Gumboot Friday does, and that's why we're backing them.
And the head of their organisation is out there saying that alcohol could be a solution, and we know the link between alcohol and suicide and young people. Any responsible government needs to hit pause and just check on the safety of our young people. We're not coming out, Chris, and saying cancel those contracts. We're saying the responsible thing for the minister and for the government to do is to check in. There's some pretty outlandish comments, and there just needs to be a sense check run over that. That's all we're asking for, and I think that's what most New Zealanders would expect when we've had something that extreme said in public.
Matt, do you anticipate giving Mike King a call today?
No, as I've said already publicly, I do not intend to talk to Mike King. I've come out. I've said I disagree with his comments at this time. Broadly, I support the work he does in advocacy in mental health. Like I say, he's led a campaign that's broken down the barriers of stigma and discrimination. But the Ministry of Health contract is with Gumboot Friday. I'm more interested in the results of ensuring that through that contract, we'll deliver support to over 15,000 young people, and that's where my focus is.
No major changes to suicide figures. These figures were put out earlier this week. It is accepted by the experts that they look for 5-year trends, so it's pretty much the same result as what it's been by the looks of things the last few years. Megan Woods, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I just want to start off, Chris, by acknowledging anyone who has been touched by suicide in their lives, and unfortunately that's far too many New Zealanders. And these numbers are incredibly difficult to process. And I think that one of the things that I actually think has been quite a good feature of New Zealand politics is that they haven't been hugely politicised. They are, as you say, they're 5-yearly figures. There is a lot of work that needs to go on behind them, and that there can be changes over time. And it's careful, and we need to be careful not to leap to sensational conclusions around figures. And we did that in government, and we'll do it in opposition as well, because this is an area that I think each and every New Zealander is concerned about, that suicide is something that we all want to see come down, and we know we've got to address those root causes of it. I mean, I'm sure both of you know people that have been touched by suicide. I certainly do, and it is an incredibly difficult time for people, and I think that's where we need to start from.
Matt, we still have a major issue, particularly with young men and suicide figures, according to those results from the Ministry of Health. and particularly Māori. What are you as Minister doing about that?
Yeah, well, like Megan too, Chris, I just want to acknowledge the 617 people that died by suspected suicide in the last financial year. All their loved ones, family and friends. This will be a difficult time for them. And clearly, one suicide in New Zealand is a tragedy, and we need to do a lot better. Currently, the suicide prevention strategy will end at the end of this year after the 5 years. We're currently reviewing it. It's actually out for consultation at the moment, and I'd ask anyone who would like to be part of that consultation to be involved. What we want to do is focus on the initiatives that we think have worked over the last 5 years, and also look at areas where potentially we can do better. One new area that we've highlighted for consultation is the rollout of crisis cafes and hubs, a place for people to go to in the time of distress. And equally, what we want to do is hear more from the lived experience community to understand how we can better respond in the time of need as well. It is a complex issue that we need to work through and navigate through as a country. But I'd ask everyone who would like to be involved in that consultation period to be part of the new strategy going forward for the next 5 years.
I want to move on to tradesmen and builders now being allowed to self-censor, self-consent. Is this really a good idea, given what I've reported earlier this week in Christchurch with over 400 homeowners now being told that a dodgy engineer was making serious errors, and now the council's come along and said, sorry, your house may not be able to be insured. Go back and pay thousands of dollars to get it re-looked at again. Megan, I'll start with you on this.
So I guess the thing that we always go to, and when we're thinking about any changes in regulation in this area, is leaky homes. And we know that the thousands of New Zealanders whose lives were really wrecked by the fact that they were let down by a system in terms of making sure that the thing they invest the most in, their home, was actually built to a standard that was going to last and not literally rot from the inside like we saw there. There are models for self-certification that can work, but we have to move incredibly carefully on this. We have to make sure that the prime person that we're thinking about when we're thinking about the building consent regime is actually the person that's putting their hard-earned cash on the line and buying a house or building a house, that we have to be looking out for them. What we also need to do, and I've heard the Minister acknowledge it this week, that some of the rhetoric's probably getting ahead of where it is that the insurance and banking industry are, because ultimately this will come down to the kinds of insurance products that will be offered to builders, and then following on from that to homeowners. And then, of course, there's the banks that kind of hold the ultimate power. Will they lend on particular properties? And if there's a property that a bank won't lend on, you suddenly find that the value just sliding away to nothing. So these are all things that have to be considered. We did some work in loosening up building consents in terms of making them as efficient as we possibly could. We set up Consentium, which could do some self-certification, but we have to proceed with the utmost caution as we go through this, and never just get carried away with, saying we want to cut red tape or green tape or whatever colour tape that the government's talking about that day. They need to think about why we have regulations in place. And we saw what happened when those weren't there to protect those thousands of homeowners who got caught in leaky home living. You still talk to people today who basically lost everything through the leaky home saga, and not only financially, but just the mental toll that it took on people, and lives, turned upside down, relationships ripped apart. So these have real world implications about over and above how many days it takes to consent a house.
Matt, it sounds very good in theory, and of course government ministers have been saying this will only be for the real big players, the ones that have proven themselves to be responsible and reliable. I've heard that before with the finance sector. I've heard that before with the leaky building issues. I mean, sometimes the biggest players can be the worst offenders.
Yeah, look, I take those views on board, and I think it is a natural tension, and that's where Megan finished off. I think when you look at it, it's about 569 days on average to build and consent a house at the moment. And you do ask yourself about how we can actually speed up that process, because all it's doing is causing delays and increased cost. And I think there is a natural tension there because, of course, we want to deliver high-quality housing in New Zealand. So that's why we've started the consultation with the sector. We want to learn and hear more from them and ensuring that we do have those safeguards in place. But we do think there's a real opportunity, like you say, Chris, is working with the trusted building professionals to look at that self-certification. I mean, it's not a new idea. When you do look at, say, electricians and gas fitters, they're already doing self-certification as well. But it's not only that, it's also thinking about how we can strengthen looking at the complaints process, ensuring our trusted building professionals are better qualified as well, and ensuring the stronger disciplinary action. So, like you say, I think the devil is a bit in the detail. The Minister, Chris Penk, is working through that. We want to work with the sector on that, but we do think there's an opportunity now to take out some of that burdensome regulation and ensuring that we can speed up consents, because ultimately where we should be in a position is that we should have more permitted activity, and then a consent should be a bit about when you're going outside that permitted activity. But unfortunately in New Zealand, we've ended up in a position where the consent is the default, which all it does is add delay and cost as well. So that's what we're working through at the moment.
Okay, just quickly, guys, I want to know, Megan, from you, does Christchurch Central City really need a camper van park? And isn't this at odds with the council's aim to have people living in the city? Are we going to have, I probably shouldn't, trailer people roaming around the streets of Christchurch? And who wants to who wants to be in a caravan park next to Latimer Square? It's not exactly the nicest area of Christchurch, to be fair.
So this is an interesting one, and I think a bit of a surprising one. It seemed to come a bit out of left field, really.
I know. It's just what? Caravan park in the central city?
Yeah, so I did have a look, and I went to chrislynchmedia.com and read the detail of the article. Chris, you'll be very pleased to know, to find out exactly what was going on.
Factual information, no agendas, just the truth. Good.
That's right. I think one of the things that I find interesting about it, and I can only imagine there's going to have to be quite a thorough consultation process to go through. This is right near where a whole lot of new residential housing has been built, that we've got those new apartments that have gone up along there. I understand it is only going to be, you can only have 28 days over a whole year that you can be there. So it's not like you could be there for 21 days, go away for a day, come back.
And it can't be used for emergency purposes either.
Totally. So, but I do think it's interesting. I look forward to hearing what comes out in the consultation, how the people that have gone and bought properties in that area feel about it, in terms of that's probably not something they knew when they were buying their new townhouses. But I think it is surprising. It's not something I'd given any thought to beforehand. I don't think any of us expected.
It's like, what? Caravan
park in Gloucester Street.
I know. Matt, just quickly, your thoughts on that? Could it work?
Yeah, I think it will work. I'm a big fan. Probably no surprise as the Minister for Tourism and Hospitality. It's going to bring real economic opportunities to the city. We've got to think of people with motorhomes. They'll park up, potentially go out for breakfast, lunch or dinner. A lot of people choose to travel by motorhomes, not only international tourists, but of course domestic visitation as well. We recently had a new motorhome park out here in Kaiapoi. It's done wonders for the town, and I think it's quite exciting, and I think personally it should be supported.
What do you think about the demographic that have those motorhomes? I mean, you know, a lot of them are semi-retired. They've got money. They don't use a camper van simply because they can't afford a hotel. It's a different experience for them, and they've got lots of money to burn. You know, that's a generalisation, but you know what I mean. They've got money, hopefully.
Yeah, very much. Think about visitation to museums, arts and culture, shows. Like you say, some people just choose to use that as a vehicle, so to speak, and accommodation as well. And I think it should be encouraged. It'll bring back real vibrancy to Christchurch. I mean, we have it already, but it will just add to it.
I think with that vacant land on the corner of Glandovia Road and Fendleton Road, we should put a camper van park there as well. I think that'd be a nice idea too, because that's a thoroughfare to the airport. Megan, just quickly.
I haven't thought about that as a location and not really familiar with the site.
Let's wind them up.
But Chris, one of the things I just want to say that I think that when the stadium opens and we start seeing both sports games and events at the multi-purpose arena, not the stadium, that I think that is obviously going to be a really appealing site for people that want to go to events that are on there. One of the other things too, before you just think about it all being retirees and their camper vans that they own, there are also a number of people that prefer international tourists that actually prefer to see New Zealand by driving around in motorhomes as well. They don't own them, they rent them. So I think that you do get that mix there. I'm not opposed to it, but what I do want to see is to make sure that the people who live in this area are completely understanding what's happening and on board with it, because the last thing we want is another kind of niggly thing like this that just kind of boils away and becomes another piece of discontent.
Are you allowed pets on camper vans that you hire? I'd take my doggy if I could.
I think you're the king of your own camper van, Chris. I think if you want to put the dog in it, you can put the dog in it.
I think you'd like it. Matt Doocey and Megan Woods, nice to speak with you both. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too. See you, mate.